Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I am reviewing The Time Machine. So I read this in middle school, and as I've said, I think I've said this before, that is probably not the best time to read that. Read something like this. I don't think I was ready for this. Not that this is that hard, because of course reading it now, it doesn't seem as dense. But I also read a lot more classics over the years, with a similar writing style, and I know the story a little bit better. And remember at the time I had watched the 2003 adaptation, because I think there were two adaptations. There was a one in 2003. I think it was 2003 when it came out. With the and then I read, and then there was the adaptation from probably like the 70s or 60s. I have to double check on that. But I want to say there were two, a really old adaptation, and there was the one in the early 2000s. And I was expecting what some of the aspects in the early 2000s one was a little bit different. It had the basic story, but there was some added stuff like the time traveler. There is a little bit of more of a romance in that adaptation, and this one it doesn't have as strong of a romance. It doesn't have really a romance at all. So this is a story about. So it has two narrators. You have this one guy. I don't remember what he did, what his job was, because but he gets invited to this time traveler's house. The guy he refers to as the time traveler, to hear his story. And you have the guy has invited a group of other people, and they're only referred to as like the editor, the doctor, the psychologist. Basically only referred to, in other words, only referred to by their job titles. And they're skeptical when he tells them about that he has invented a time machine. So the next time they visit him, he has come back from traveling through time, and he's very disheveled. He was late to meet them, and he tells their story. And that's when we go into the second narrator, the time traveler himself. And he tells how he had traveled so far forward in time, that everything is a lot more primitive now, and society is divided into two groups. You have the Eloi, and you have the Morlocks. And the Eloi are these very primitive, very happy. They don't have a lot to worry about. They're not as smart because they're not as advanced as the society. They just, gather food. They're also vegetarians. And they're just very peaceful and happy. But the time traveler refers to them as like being like children. He has to, when he comes across them and meets them, he has to teach them a lot, about the world and show them things. They're very, fascinated by everything. And one of them, he ends up saving her life, and she becomes very attached to him, and that's the character of Lena. So he ends up discovering his time machine has been stolen, and it's been taken by the Morlocks, who live underground, who are very advanced. But the fact that they live underground has altered their physical features. They're a lot scarier, they're more savage, but they're also very, capable of building a lot, and they're fascinated by machines and whatnot. And the time traveler, what I thought was really interesting is he compares them to the labor force and the aristocrats. How the Morlocks are like the labor, and the Eloi are the people, the labor for the aristocrats who don't, have to work as hard. They're a little more laid back and lazy and have an easier life. In fact, the Morlocks are the only thing that they have to worry about. So I like this a lot better now than I did in middle school. And like I said, I had seen the adaptation from 2003, so I was expecting that. And I sort of got that. I mean, it was the basic story, but there was differences, like I said. So the time traveler wants to go through time because he wants to see how far society has advanced. But in that adaptation, they add a little bit of a romance in the story, where he has a fiance, but she ends up getting killed on the night he proposes to her. So he wants to travel. He becomes obsessed with traveling through time, traveling back in time to stop her death. And in both stories, he does get knocked out, and that's how he ends up going too forward, because he's not awake to stop it, to stop the time machine. And so that happened, but the motives of the time traveler change and are altered in that adaptation. And it's more of an emotional story. Oh, this is more of a, academic, fun adventure story. And so so at the time, I wanted the more emotional story, but now I'm okay, with it not having that part. So I find it, really cool. His learning about the different cultures, the Eloi and the Morlocks, through his eyes is really cool. And it's an easy way to explain these two different races, human races, through showing it through the eyes of someone who doesn't understand and doesn't know, and is ignorant of what has happened. So we got to really get to know these two groups of people. And it was like, I feel like it was H.G. Wells having some observations about humanity and his fears for humanity. Like thinking that we might go so far in advance that something like this might happen. Like I said, I personally think we don't have to worry. We might have to worry more about, social media. Like, that's our advancement now, and that should be our concern. So I think actually The Circle by David Eggers covers that more. Expresses the fears of humanity now. What could happen to humanity. But it's still interesting food for thought. Like, I think this definitely provides a nice food for thought. Thinking about, like, how we are so obsessed with advancement in technology and improving on technology, and wondering where are we going to go from here. The dangers of that. Now we have a lot more science fiction stories, whether it's a movie. Like, I was just watching a review of the Megan movie coming out that just came out a month ago, which I cannot wait till it comes on streaming networks, because I so want to watch that. Movies like that, and then, like I said, The Circle by David Eggers, and then there's other stories, other dystopians and sci-fi that explore some of our fears of what could happen to our society. Not just technology, what technology could do to us, but also, like, other issues, like, like sexism and racism. You have books like The Handmaid's Tale and its sequel, The Testament. So a lot of people run with the same idea of fears for society, or see how far we'll go when we advance, and if that's a good or a bad thing, who knows. Right now it could just be seen as a bad thing. I definitely think people are wary, because, like I said, you have all these stories that are about that. And I guess you could say someone like H.G. Wells started that fear. Or at least that consideration, that concern. Anyway, so, I also really like stories where you have a character. I also like stories where the character, like, this at the center. Like, it can be boring at times and tedious, just because they look at every little thing, and there's sometimes when you have that character as a narrator, sometimes they can get, like, very detailed and descriptive to the point of boring. Now, I really appreciate this was not a super long book, so that really helped with this. But yeah, there's a lot of probably chapters that people would find tedious, because he's explains everything about the Morlocks and everything about more the Eli. Like, there's a lot more focus on the Eloi, but you don't even know their name until he comes across the Morlocks. So, and I just know because it's part of pop culture now. A lot of people know about this book. If they haven't read the book, they've at least seen an adaptation. But, and obviously people in literary circles would know about, and people that are readers probably are familiar with this. But yeah, we don't even find their names until later. And I don't know if he could have expanded this a little bit more. That would have been interesting to see how far he could take this, if, what more he could add to it. And like I said, they kind of, not only do they give the time traveler a fiance in that adaptation that I mentioned, but also I think they suggest his, finding new love with Weena in that adaptation. But this one, his dynamic with Weena is she's more like his child. He's a guardian to her, her protector. Because even though she's a grown woman, she's very, very clingy and looks up to him, and, she worries about him, but not as in a romantic partner, because she has a very childlike mind. So if anyone sees them as romantic, that'd be a little creepy to me. But I mean, it was a movie adaptation, so maybe they decide to add that to give it more, drama or something, to make it more interesting and engaging, because the story is not as, I don't think it's for everybody. I think, like I said, I think at times it can be tedious. But it's also a quick read. Yes, it's slow, but it's also very quick, because it's only let's see how many chapters. Let's see. Yeah, 11, I think there's, only 11 chapters, so it's not that long. But, like I said, it reads kind of slow. And there are, that was the other thing they did in that adaptation with, is that they made, is that the Morlock, there is one Morlock who's in charge of all the other Morlocks. And there's a conversation between him and the time traveler in the 2003 adaptation, and there's really no Morlock. In fact, there's not a lot of Morlock time. I wish there had been more with the Morlocks. And maybe if they had done what that adaptation did, which was maybe come up with a leader of the Morlocks, because all that happened, because there wasn't. I guess I can't really tell you because it would spoil it. But like I said, there was just not a lot of time with the Morlocks. It was kind of disappointing with them. They weren't that scary. I mean, I imagine if you're reading this for the first time as a kid, then maybe they would be creepy. But, like I said, I saw that 2003 adaptation. That's the price of watching the adaptation first. Sometimes the adaptation can ruin a book for you. It can make it a little disappointing. At least for older books. Not not more contemporary books, but a lot of classics. For me, sometimes I end up liking the adaptation a little bit better because I'm a modern, 21st century audience member, and I'm used to movies and TV shows, and books a little more slow and don't have as much action all the time, unless, especially in this genre, in the sci-fi genre or the fantasy genre. Sometimes the older ones are a little slower and, like I said, don't have a lot of action packed, and they're focused, they're more character driven, which is not a bad thing. But if you're used to the instant gratification of movies or TV shows, then sometimes it can be disappointing. But anyway, this is still really good. Like I said, I liked it better than the first time I read it in middle school. I think it's a good place to start if you're getting into sci-fi. That maybe start here and go from here. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this would ruin. Maybe not. Maybe this could, take away the appeal of sci-fi. I don't know. But anyway, so that is my review of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. If you guys like this video, be sure to give a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification below if you want to be notified. I hope you are enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!